I think this is the message. I think this is the future. So if advanced UK leads Britain, what does a sovereign spiritually nation look like? How would you inspire people to see themselves as agents of God's will in a Christian culture and a Christian nation?
Yeah, so one thing, when we had the beautiful system I described before Tony Blair came into office, British people went around holding their Britishness in their pocket, their belief systems in their pocket. It was incredibly impolite to ever discuss it in public, certainly not at dinner parties or after school uh, uh, tea gatherings of parents or anything like that. You would talk about what little Johnny's up to at school. You would never talk about the nation state or our Christian roots, our great history. All of these things were not necessary to be talked about because we took them for granted. It was just second nature to us. And we didn't sing the national anthem a lot because we didn't need to bang our chests and be muscular about our nationality because we were so confident in who we were that we didn't bother with it.
And that's
And
so foreign to an American audience. Americans don't understand that because it's so central to our identities. This is one of the subtle
yeah,
differences between our cultures. Just continue. I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
it's a very important point you make. And sadly, and I say this sadly, I think that going forward to rebalance the organism that is the United Kingdom, we are now going to have to be much more self-confident, much more proselytizing, much more muscular in advancing our nationality and our Christian heritage, our culture, our roots, our history, everything. We're going to have to be much more on the front foot of it because unless we get on the front foot, we're going to be overrun by people who hold views that are not just antithetical to us, but antipathetic to us, who wish to wipe us out. And so, Advance UK is going to have a very positive program of the advancement of what it means to be British, and just remind everyone why they should be so damn proud of this country.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Preston Bates Show, where we rip through the lies, the noise, the fog of this fallen world to see what's really going on up in the heavens and right here on Earth. I'm Preston Bates, and tonight we're diving into the fight of all fights, the only fight that matters, the spiritual Armageddon playing out in your newsfeed, your church pew, your very soul. And let me tell you something, without a compass, you're lost. You're sitting duck for the liars, the manipulators, the globalist ghouls, and worse, the spiritual predators who want to chain you to their version of hell on earth. But you don't have to be. Stay with me because we're going to arm you with the truth tonight and it's going to set you free. Let's cut to the chase. You turn on the TV, scroll X, check the headlines. What do you see? Chaos, border invasions, digital currencies creeping in, the World Economic Forum preaching their dystopian gospel like it's the second coming. You've got intelligence operatives, rats, I call them, spinning UFO yarns to keep you distracted while they tighten the screws. And don't get me started on the churches. Half of them are peddling a watered-down checkbox Christianity that's about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Even the sharpest folks, people who read, who think, who pray, feel like they're drowning in this sea of lies. Why? Because that's the plan, folks. The elites, the powers behind the curtain, they want you confused. They want you scared. They want you to throw up your hands and say, fine, take over. But here's the good news. You've got a weapon, a compass called Christ, and it's the only way to navigate the spiritual battlefield without getting picked off by the enemy. Now let's get real about what we're up against. This isn't politics or culture wars. This is a cosmic showdown. Good versus evil, harmony versus chaos. God's will versus the schemes of spiritual predators. Picture it like this. On one side, you've got the forces of good, the living God and his ambassador, the Christ, the radiant power of divine love and truth that pulls us toward unity, toward purpose, toward a world where every soul can stand as tall as a co-worker in God's plan. And on this world, you've got physical warriors carrying that torch, men like Alex Jones, waking millions with his firebrand truth, or Donald Trump, who stared death in the face in Butler, Pennsylvania, and came out saying, God's got a mission for me. These are good guys, folks, not because they're perfect, but because they're aligned with the divine harmony that says, you are free, you are sovereign, you are a child of God. But on the other side, it's a rogues gallery of evil, and I'm not just talking about the suits at Davos, though they're part of it. Let's name the spiritual heavyweights first, because this fight starts in the unseen realms. You've got Ahriman, the cold, calculating spirit of materialism, who wants to chain your soul to a world of machines, surveillance, and control. Ahriman's the one whispering to the tech lords, the central bankers, the transhumanist weirdos who think merging man with machine is the future. He's behind the digital IDs, the social credit scores, the whole technocratic nightmare that says worship physical things, worship the algorithm. Then there's Lucifer, the slick talker, the serpent of pride and self-deification. Lucifer doesn't want you to bow to God. He wants you bowing to your own ego, chasing spiritual highs, new age nonsense, or the lie that you can be God. And worst of all, you've got the Antichrist, not some cartoon villain with horns, but a deceptive force that mimics Christ's light to trap souls in what the great Christian mystic Rudolf Steiner called the eighth sphere. That's the end game, folks. A counterfeit reality where every human soul is totally cut off from God. Now let's bring it down to earth, because these spiritual forces don't just float in the ether. They've got physical agents doing their dirty work. You know their names. The World Economic Forum with their Great Reset claptrap is Ahriman's fan club pushing a world where you own nothing, eat bugs, and thank them for it. Bill Gates with his vaccine obsession and farmland grab is another Ahrimanic foot soldier, turning God's creation into a sterile, controlled grid. And don't forget the forces of Lucifer, the intelligence rats, those CIA MI6 operatives, you name it, who flood the UFO disclosure scene with fake whistleblowers like Lou Elizondo to keep you chasing your tail instead of asking, what's really going on? These are the physical faces of evil, folks, and they're not just out to control your body, they want your soul. They want you so bogged down in materialism, fear, or pride that you forget who you are. A child of God, born for greatness, for freedom. So how do we fight back? How do we navigate this Armageddon without getting sucked in by the lies? Simple, but not easy. You need a compass, and that compass is Christ. Not the Christ of bumper stickers or stained glass windows, though he's there too, but the living, breathing Christ who transformed your heart, your mind, your very being into a weapon for God's will. See, the truth resonates in your heart. You know it when you feel it. God is anything that enlarges your agency, that makes you a willing partner in God's plan, that says, get up, you've got work to do. Evil, it's the opposite. It's what dulls your spiritual senses, traps you in the material world, or whispers, forget God, chase your own glory. And let me tell you, the biggest con job in this fight isn't coming from Davos or Langley. It's coming from the pulpits of what I call churchianity. Yeah, churchianity. You know what I'm talking about. Those institutions. Some of them well-meaning, some of them not, that reduce Christianity to a checklist. Go to church on Sunday, say the right prayers, don't swear, and you're good. It's a moral legalism, folks, and it's as dead as a doornail. Worse, it's a trap. It's Ahriman and clerical collar, turning the blazing, transformative power of Christ into a set of rules that keeps you docile, passive, and spiritually asleep. Churchianity doesn't want you wrestling with principalities and powers like Ephesians 6:12 tells us. It wants you sitting quietly in the pew thinking salvation's a participation trophy. But that's not what Christ came for. The mystery of Christ should never be reduced to checking boxes. Christ came to initiate your knowledge of God through direct experience, a knowledge that liberates you from the lies this material world is all that there is, lies told to you by Ahriman and Lucifer. Christ came to transform your psychology, to wake you up to your divine heritage. He came to make you his MVP on earth. He came to transform you from a spectator to a co-creator in God's will. Let's talk about what that means, because this is what the heart of tonight's show is all about. Christ's purpose isn't to make you a better rule follower. It's to initiate a revolution in your soul. It's to give you a direct personal experience of God's infinite compassion and love, a moment so real, so undeniable that it rewires your heart, your character, your entire being. That's what happened to Alex Jones, folks. 28 years ago, he felt God's presence like an ambassador angel downloading a mission, Fight evil, wake the world. And look at them now. Billions reached, millions brought to God through InfoWars, battling the globalist machine with a fire that only Christ can ignite. Or take Donald Trump, who after assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, said he felt God's hand calling him to revive America. These aren't just men. They're proof that a direct encounter with the divine can transform you into a force for good, a warrior in this spiritual Armageddon. Contrast that with churchianity's one-dimensional view. It's like they're selling you a knockoff Christ, a guy who's more concerned about taking attendance than transforming lives. But the real Christ, he's about union with God, that sense of oneness with the divine that makes you whole. He's about transformation of yourself and the world around you. He's about developing your spiritual faculties, mastering your personality, and stepping into your role as God's agent on earth. This isn't about escapism, folks. This isn't some New Age Luciferian fluff where you float off to a happy place. This is about ascending to God through Christ and bringing God's will down to earth. It's about healing. It's about truth. It's about standing up to the Ahrimanic technocrats and the Luciferian egomaniacs and saying, not on my watch. So how do you get there? How do you tap into this power? You pray, but not the rote prayers of churchianity. You pray for two things. First, a direct, irrefutable experience of Christ's love, something that hits you like a lightning bolt and leaves no doubt. Second, you pray to be made larger in Christ and to be transformed into an agent of God's will, not your own. Because here's the moral compass, and it's simple. Self-will is Luciferian. It's the path of pride, the path of I'm my own God. Working in God's will, that's holy, that's righteous, that's the path of Christ. Now let's be clear, the forces of evil don't want you to do this. Ahriman wants you glued to your smartphone, stressing about your bills or obsessing over the next crisis they manufacture. Lucifer wants you chasing self-glory, thinking you're above it all, too enlightened for God. And the Antichrist, he's the ultimate con, offering a fake salvation that leads straight to the eighth sphere, a spiritual dead end where souls are trapped, cut off from God, and harvested by elites who think they're gods themselves. That's what the World Economic Forum's "you'll own nothing and be happy" mantra is really about, folks. It's not just economic, it's spiritual. They want you disconnected, dependent, and blind to your divine birthright. But you're not helpless. You're not a pawn. You're a child of God, and with Christ as your compass, you can see through the lies. You can spot the Ahrimanic influence in the control grid, with social credit scores and digital currencies forcing you into their will. You can spot the pride and lies of Lucifer and anything arrogant, delusional, new agey, and specifically in the push of transhumanism's delusion to become a god with the brain chipping and AI. You can feel the truth in your heart because that's where Christ speaks. When you align with him, you become unstoppable. You become God's MVP, just like Alex Jones, just like Trump, just like the guest we're bringing on tonight, Ben Habib, a man fighting the Ahrimanic globalists with his new movement and political party, Advance UK. Tonight, we're going to talk to Ben Habib about how he's taking on the physical agents of evil, the World Economic Forum, the EU, the whole globalist cabal, and how his fight is part of this larger spiritual war. Then, we're going to dive into stories of Alex Jones and Donald Trump, two modern mystical Christians who've had direct experiences of God and are leading the charge against darkness. And we're going to show you how to pray for your own encounter with Christ so you can join this fight, not as a bystander, but as a warrior. Before we go to break, let me leave you with this. The world's a mess, but it's not hopeless. The spiritual Armageddon is raging, but you've got the ultimate weapon, Christ, the compass, who never fails. Pray for his guidance, pray for his transformation, and get ready to step into your role as God's MVP on earth. If this is hitting you, if you're feeling that fire, do me a favor, like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe so you don't miss anything, and drop a comment. What's stopping you from joining this fight? We're in this together, folks. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Ben Habib, and you don't want to miss it. The growth of most e-commerce businesses doesn't stall because their ads stop working. They stall because they run out of capital. You got a winning campaign, and instead of scaling it, you hesitate. Not because you don't believe in it, but because your cash flow is too tight. You're waiting on payouts. You've got inventory to cover. Maybe payroll's due in a few days, so the ads get paused. Momentum disappears, and the growth slows again. That cycle, it's brutal, and it's way more common than you think. That's exactly why we built ad capitalism. It's a new kind of growth framework that gives founders access to revolving credit made specifically for ad spend. Not a generic loan, not some use it however you want line of credit. This is capital aligned with what actually drives growth, paid traffic. With ad capitalism, you can launch new campaigns without draining your reserves, push spend on what's working while you wait on revenue to catch up, scale with confidence, knowing you're not going to run out of gas mid-launch. This isn't theory. It's how top brands are scaling to 7 and 8 figures without giving up equity or begging VCs for a check. They're driving growth with a strategy that matches the speed of their business. You can do the same. So if you're sitting on a great offer, if your ROAS is dialed in, but you feel you're stuck trying to move faster, click below. Let's show you how ad capitalism works and how it can unlock the scale you've been building toward all along. And now joining me is my guest, Ben Habib. Ben, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Hello, Preston. Delighted to be here. Thank you very much indeed for having me on.
Let's jump right into it. You launched Advance UK to fight for the British people. How does your mission counter the globalist agenda of groups like the WEF, which we see as an anti-Christian organization pushing crass materialism and control?
So there are four principal guidelines for the party that I've just set up, none of which are really dramatic or radical. They're very traditional guidelines that the party is going to be governed by, and they are the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain in all its parts and for all its people, understanding that constitutionally we're a Christian country, freedom of speech. People should be allowed to say whatever it is they wish to say, as long as they're not inciting violence. Freedom of speech, of course, is a cornerstone of democracy. Our third guideline is democracy. And under that heading, we eschew what I would call the supranational international order that has so damaged nation states and democracies across Western civilization. Included amongst that lot is obviously the World Economic Forum to which you referred, and about which I'm very happy to speak in greater detail if you like. But from our UK-centric position, the big evil entity in the room is the European Union. We've been struggling to break ourselves away from that supranational entity. We still haven't done it. And then the fourth guideline by which we are governing the party and it effectively setting its aims is equity under the law, equality under the law, so that we cease to have a two-tier criminal justice system. We cease to be making exceptions for people depending on their ethnicity and their social backgrounds and so on, and putting a blindfold again round the eyes of Lady Justice, because she should be blindfolded. Justice should be delivered without prejudice. So those are the four principal guidelines. And I would say that the supranational entities, as I mentioned earlier, stand in opposition to virtually all of them. I know that I mentioned them only under the heading of democracy, but if you remove the democracies of nation states, you effectively remove the nation state. And in order to do that, a key component of doing it is shutting down freedom of speech. And then, of course, there's no equity under the law at that point. You're living under a kind of semi-totalitarian, if not entirely totalitarian, form of governance. And that is what we're actually seeing, Preston. It's a very interesting question you led with, because what we have in the Western world at the moment is a battle between, as I mentioned, the supranational entities, international law on one side, and their manifestation locally, which I would say is quangos, the bureaucrats, the unelected bodies that have been created because they're meant to be expert and know better than the people. That's one side of the political argument. And then the other side of the argument is the one of which I'm part, which is pro-nation state, pro-freedom of speech, pro-equality under the law, pro-democracy. However messy democracy might be, it is the best system. It's the best system out of potentially a load of bad systems, but it's the best one. And it's the one that it's the only one in my mind that allows nation states to go forward and for people to feel secure within those nation states. Everything else, I think, is damaging to the fabric of the nation state, the people, and therefore humanity itself, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. On this show, we talk about spiritual intelligence to spot truth from lies. How do you discern deception in politics, and what role does your faith and your Christian spirituality play in that?
That I'm not. I have to be absolutely frank with you, Preston. I'm not particularly spiritual. I am baptized, and my mother is Anglo-Saxon Christian. My father is a Pakistani lapsed Muslim, I would say. Um, but I feel entirely culturally Christian, and if you go back to defining the nation state again, a nation state as a society is nothing more than the present context of its cultural and historical past. That's all it is. That's what you are. You're the creation of that which went before you. And we are constitutionally a Christian country. And I think one of the reasons the United Kingdom became such a great country and is still such a great country, even though it's under attack, in my view, even though it's under attack, is because of its Christian roots. And Christianity, I mean, like all religions, has evolved over time. But the particular form of Christianity that we have had in the United Kingdom has been particularly conducive to the advancement of its people and all those with whom our Christianity and our constitution and culture have come into contact with. And I think that's partly why we had such a successful empire. It wasn't that we went abroad and we were aggressive, and there was a degree of aggression, no doubt, but it wasn't that our entire empire was thought through, premeditated, and then delivered at the end of the barrel of a gun. It was delivered really through going abroad, winning hearts and minds, exporting our values, exporting our Christian heritage, and our common law, which is obviously all bound up in the same thing. And so, just going back to the guidelines of the party, that's why under the nation state, we've reminded people who read our constitutional document that we are a Christian country. And one of the things that is being the supranational entities, this global order, is seeking to set that aside because it can't give effect to its globalism unless it sets aside Christianity. And without wishing to digress too much, I'll come back to your point. Starmer, at the moment, you might be aware, Preston, is seeking to remove the bishopric from the House of Lords. And, he can justify that any which way he wishes to, but the end result of that will be the removal of Christianity from our constitutional framework. We will cease to be a Christian country when he removes the bishopric from the House of Lords. And so we must resist that with all our might, because we will cease to be the country that we were, the great country that we were, with all the security that went with it. And but at a personal level, I take all my guidance, as you might have noted from what I've just said, from that construct. But I don't go to church, every week, or so I certainly don't go every day. I do go on occasion, and I do sing heartily when I'm in church. But it's interesting. I talk about our constitution being Christian, but I've just reminded myself that when we go to church, we also remind ourselves often through the hymns we sing the nature of our country, the nation that is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And as I'm sure you're aware, and many people watching and listening will be aware, that when you walk into an English church, you often see the names and emblems of fallen soldiers and testaments to them. And we live, our church lives absolutely integrated in our past and in our history and in what we are. They go together. And so it's church and state, and it's state and church. And it's absolutely vital that we don't forget that in the United Kingdom.
Great answer. My question for you is, do you see this fight on the UK and in the EU and just anywhere where there's a group resisting anti-sovereignty agendas as part of a larger spiritual battle where sovereignty reflects God's gift of free will?
Well, you certainly can't have a belief in God if you accept every single ideology that exists across the globe. And the supranational order wishes to accept everything. I mean, I think one of the greatest, there are two significant steps that this country, the United Kingdom, took, which have deeply damaged the constitution of the country and its cultural integrity, its societal integrity. The first was the adoption of the Human Rights Act, which basically equated all foreigners' rights to British citizens' rights in the mistaken pursuit of the protection of human rights. What we've done is set aside what it means to be a British citizen. And then we went one step further. We then passed something called the Equalities Act. And alongside the Equalities Act came a whole load of other regulations, which progressively discriminated in favor of foreign cultures that have come to this country, including, of course, foreign religions, because a religion is a culture in itself. And so what we now have in the United Kingdom is a lack of understanding of what it means to be a British citizen. You'll often hear people saying, well, what does it mean to be British? And in order to answer it, they fall back on the codified nature of the Human Rights Act, which is not what it means to be British. That is just a codification of rights. And then they go on to say, and we're tolerant and we support and promote other ideologies and other religions, and we're not Islamophobic and so on. But what they fail to recognize is that in the protective blanket that the Equalities Act, the progressive discrimination, has put round all these foreign cultures and foreign ideologies, is that we are destroying our own ideology. So if you destroy your own ideology, if you become a society with lots of different belief systems, lots of different ideologies, not integrating and perhaps finding a new form of settlement, but all coexisting, often with division between them, then you are not a society, actually. It's a misquote. The term society requires a settled, virtually homogenous, integrated culture. That's what a society is. And if you don't have a society, you don't have a nation state. So the global order, which requires you to recognize all peoples and all their belief systems, at least as equal to yours, literally does set aside nation states. It sets aside the principle of a nation state.
I'd say the defining issue of the global liberty movement is the concept of border security and national sovereignty. So, how will Advance UK address the domestic and wider European immigration crisis?
So the first thing to do is to repeal virtually every single damn regulation and law that's been put in place in the United Kingdom since Tony Blair came to office in 1997. We need to re-establish, through the body of law that existed before 1997, that which defined us as the United Kingdom and the peoples of the United Kingdom. There was no one regulation that did it, no one law. It was a body of law that existed in a very sensitively settled position. And we had come to that very settled position over hundreds of years of incremental evolution. What Tony Blair did was to launch a massive revolution of our constitution. We don't have a written constitution as you do in the United States, but we have a constitution. It's not written, and it's a very subtle one because it's not written. It works on precedent. It works on protocol, established ways of behaving, and so on. And Tony Blair swept that aside, and he tried to codify everything. And in the pursuit of codifying it, including human rights, the creation of the Bank of England, the separation of powers by the creation of the Supreme Court, actually what he did was phenomenal damage to the Constitution of the UK and therefore the nation state of the UK. And when you do that kind of damage, you do lose an understanding of what borders mean. So, for example, our forefathers would have had no qualms and no concerns about recognizing that a border is not just a theoretical line, it's a line that physically defines your nation state and that it must be physically defended. It must be patrolled. We must protect our borders, because if we don't protect our borders, we cease to be a country. Literally, if you don't have a border, you're not a country. But in codifying all these rights and attempting to codify our constitution in a roundabout means, Tony Blair removed our connection with what our forefathers would have seen as absolutely naturally and so self-evidently obvious. He removed our connection with borders, and which is why we find it so difficult to say to those would-be illegal migrants in France wishing to come to the UK that no, you must not try and enter our territorial waters. You must stay in France. You're not allowed in. And if you try to enter, we will physically resist you. Don't do it. For the sake of your own safety, don't do it. We don't have the courage to do that anymore because we're hijacked by this body of law that he brought in. So to reestablish, the first thing that has to be done to reestablish our borders and reacquaint ourselves with what it means to be British, borders being a prerequisite for that, is to remove the body of law that Tony Blair and successive governments have put in place.
If you are successful in building a majority coalition and become PM with Advance UK, there's no doubt that the enemy will use a series and a battery of crises that will be engineered specifically to attack your agenda. So how will you resist these engineered crises, and how will you expose and counter these manipulative strategies?
The first thing that I'm praying for is that Trump is a huge success with his agenda in the United States. People point to the Trump administration's first few days and they say it's all been a bit tumultuous. And I would have expected it to be nothing less than tumultuous, because what Trump is trying to do is fight exactly the same challenges that you've just outlined, Preston. And if Trump can succeed, if he can get rid of progressive discrimination, reestablish American borders, make it perfectly acceptable again to put America first, to put the United States first, put American citizens first, reestablish what it means, the privilege of being an American citizen. If he can achieve those things, then it'll be a much easier job for a British government coming in 2029 to follow, because the most powerful country in the world has already led the way, and we will have a route and a protective blanket of the United States effectively to do it. When I say a protective blanket, I don't mean in a patrician sense. I think a lot of the things that Trump will have to do to make America great again may have adverse consequences for us unless we follow his agenda. We might find ourselves economically much worse off if America resurges and we don't follow his basic agenda. There may be a lot of tough love that needs to be delivered to Western civilization by the US until Western civilization broadly wakes up to what it needs to do. But I really hope Trump succeeds. If he succeeds, we will have a much easier job of it as a government, because we will be able to basically copy and paste what he's done into the United Kingdom. And there'll also be much less resistance from the people and from the bureaucracy and the lanyard class. But having said all of that, we can't be relying on the United States. We need to have our own ability to do it. And I think a critical component of what's required for any incoming government is now to be building the intellectual heft and capability of any future cabinet, ensuring that they are not just allied in the way that they see the world and what they believe is required for saving the United Kingdom and reestablishing its greatness again. But they are capable executioners of that policy, and that they are fearless in their pursuit of it. We must have people who are incapable of being bought off by the power of patronage. We must have people who do not fear being attacked personally, and do not fear being cancelled. And one of the things that I find quite worrying about the present political party, and I wouldn't have set up Advance UK if I didn't find the entire present political system a bit concerning.
Oh,
But
please go on. Please continue.
there isn't a single political party which is making a real attempt, or any attempt, as far as I can see, at assembling a team of Hercules. We need a team of Hercules, Samsons, to come together so that we can fight the inevitable challenges to which you refer. But Reform UK is not doing it. It hasn't got a constitution or a structure in the party that would allow it to happen. Reform UK is Farage and Farage is Reform UK. The Conservative Party is completely hijacked by its central office, which effectively has bought hook, line, and sinker into the supranational order. They find it very challenging to recognize, for example, that the European Convention of Human Rights is no longer acting to protect human rights, that it's become a malign force. The Conservative Party is still wrestling to understand that, and that should be a given. And so one of the things I've done in Advance UK is set up I think that I hope this will resonate with you. A body of people, it's unique in politics as far as I'm aware. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong. A body of people called a college, which will number up to 100 people. They'll be elected from the membership, and they will represent, they will not be allowed to be on the shilling of the party. They will not take any money from the party. They will not allowed to be elected members of any parliament or council or anything like that. They will be entirely independent of the executive, entirely independent of the apparatus of the state. They will be in the party because they are going to be the heart, souls, guiders, political philosophy, the conscience, and the intellectual heft of the party. They will be there to make sure that the mission statement and the guidelines that I've just described to you that Advance UK has will be delivered come hell or high water, and that the executive will be held to account to make sure that they deliver them. And through that body of people, I hope that Advance UK, even if it doesn't succeed at the next election, will have the wherewithal to stay the distance and keep fighting until it delivers on its objective. And and that's frankly the kind of body of people you will need in government to do for the United Kingdom what I hope it will do for Advance UK.
It sounds like a true innovation. Your own School of Athens, beyond an advisory board, a super advisory board, almost like a Marvel movie, but for reforming or
Yeah.
fixing, restoring, advancing, sending the UK into its next millennia of greatness, if I understand. And you used a metaphor of a team of Hercules. I'm sadly referred to the Trump and Elon saga as heartbreaking because it is. We need one team of champions united for America. And similarly over here, the old MI5, MI6 divide and conquer playbook seems to be afoot. How do how do you guys take on Nigel Farage and reform if, um, Rupert Lowe's announcing a non-political party on the same day you're announcing Advance UK, if there's now three of you fighting for a center right or right of center coalition group? I mean, how do we get the best talent on one team to be able to stop labor or prevent there being a fracture and labor just going through because they're the simple majority?
There's no point having a Reform UK government, none, even though it carries the hopes and aspirations of the people who believe in the things that I've just described. It'll be a spectacular failure in delivering them. Farage doesn't have a political philosophy. I think the last time he developed anything close to political philosophy was probably in the 1980s. He's a classic Thatcherite liberal, and in many ways, so was I. And I believe in the Thatcherite economic model. But I think what's changed since the 1980s is that it's not any longer the economy that is the salient issue. The salient issue is nation states, democracy, culture, and people. And Reform UK in Farage has failed really to recognize that. And if he's recognized it at a kind of political level, he hasn't yet accepted it in his heart. And if you look at what Farage is saying and doing, it undermines the thesis that I've just been talking about. Um, for example, he is on the record saying he's not worried about the rate of demographic change in the country. He's on the record saying he's not in favor of deporting all illegal migrants. He feels that no matter how barbarian the practice of halal is, that there are too many Muslims in the country to challenge that way of killing an animal. Um, Farage is an appeaser. He's a political expedient. He will do what's required in order to gain office. He carries no hope to save the United Kingdom. The Conservative Party, as I mentioned, is hijacked by Liberal Democrats. So there's a big issue there. And so what I say to those who say, Ben, you're just going to have a whole splint of movements is, well, actually, there isn't a single entity. I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, but there isn't a single entity really representing the values that Advance UK represents. And the key thing actually between now and 2029, or certainly 2028, is not to be fretting too much about splintering the vote or splintering the support for these various movements. It's winning the argument. We first have to win the argument for nation state, freedom of speech, democracy and equality under the law. And as I say, these guiding principles, these four guiding principles that I've just mentioned and I've been talking at length earlier, they should be self-evident. Every government of any political hue should believe in those four things, but they don't. And and we've got to establish that narrative first. We've got to establish that political philosophy first. If that isn't established in the electorate's mind, then it doesn't matter, frankly, what happens in 2029, because that agenda will not be delivered. So the
What's your
first,
plan?
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was just saying, the first task we've got is to, drive that message home into the British electorate.
What's your plan to challenge technocracy like surveillance, digital currencies, social credit scores, net zero, the next wave of it that we aren't even imagining yet, geoengineering, which the UK government denied forever and then just admitted this spring that they're actually proud of doing and ramping up. John Brennan, former CIA director under Barack Obama, admits they call it, they have an array of technologies, stratospheric aerosolized injections. Florida just banned it. Other states in the US are banning it. It's not a fringe conspiracy theory, it's an advanced weapons system like HARP and other things like the neutrino detector down in Antarctica, also a phased array technology. What is your plan to combat all of these technocracies that seek to kind of trap the sovereign, trap
Yeah.
sovereignty into a prison? What's your plan to challenge those policies?
Well, my plan is to reestablish democracy. The four guiding principles I have already basically reestablished democracy. And if you reestablish democracy and you remove the undemocratic forces that we have that are taking greater and greater power, then these kinds of things can't happen. You can't have net zero, for example, in a country which is truly democratic, because net zero is so self-evidently against the majority's interest. It's not going to advance mankind's benefit. All it's going to do is deliver the British people into penury, and it's doing that already very successfully. We have some of the highest energy prices in the world in the United Kingdom. We've done it more effectively than any other country. And when I say effectively, I mean delivering us into penury than any other country in the world. And if you were being governed by democratic principles, Preston, you wouldn't be able to do it. So the key is to go back to that basic set of principles and eject the supranational order so that you govern for the people. And governing for the people means giving people freedom. So you can't have CBDCs, government-backed digital currencies. You can't have that in a world of freedom. You can't have identity cards. When you have great discord in a country, when you have great division because of multiculturalism, a lack of trust between people, crime is on the up, and so on. That's when the supranational engine, as it were, the anti-democratic forces kick in, and they go, well, okay, we've got all this discord. Now we need to settle it. We better have ID cards. We better bring back the death penalty. Assisted dying, which is now coming in the UK, well, that's part of the same agenda. They start spreading the tentacles of the state even further in order to, they say, to solve the problems that the state created in the first place. And what we've got to do, and I don't want to over labor the point, but it's very important to take it on board, is that in this country, we had a very beautifully balanced, sensitive, political, constitutional setup. It came about over hundreds of years with incremental change. It was really a most wonderful thing that the UK had. The world looked at the United Kingdom as a bastion of stability because of its complete refusal to do anything more than in increments and to do nothing dramatically. We did everything entirely undramatically, which is why we queue as a nation, because we're not dramatic. We don't want that kind of rapid advancement. We've got to find our way back to that. We've got to do it. And it doesn't come through draconian steps. People like Tony Blair, the architect of the misery that we're now suffering, is in favor of ID cards because he says that's going to solve the problems he created. No, the ID card is yet another extension of the problem. CBDC is an extension of the problem. Net zero is an extension of the problem. Literally trying to control the climate is an extension of the problem. And if we can get back to our constitutional roots, those issues, I think, evaporate.
Got it. So we go back to a
Yeah,
hardcore democracy, and those problems are rooted out
yeah,
ipso facto because we have, and it sounds tautological, but because we have democracy, we can't have supranational, transnational entities imposing
does
their policies
does
on
that
people.
does that make sense? I hope
That
I
makes
haven't.
total
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
It's really just a hardcore reform of going back to democracy. It's purging anti-democratic institutions, anti-democratic policies outside of the
yeah,
scope of government, from what I understand, which
absolutely.
I totally endorse. I think this is the message. I think this is the future. So if advanced UK leads Britain, what does a sovereign, spiritually nation look like? How would you inspire people to see themselves as agents of God's will in a Christian culture and a Christian nation?
Yeah. So one thing, when we had the beautiful system I described before Tony Blair came into office, British people went around holding their Britishness in their pocket, their belief systems in their pocket. It was incredibly impolite to ever discuss it in public, certainly not at dinner parties or at, after school uh, uh, tea gatherings of parents or anything like that. You would talk about what little Johnny's up to at school. You would never talk about the nation state or our Christian roots, our great history. All of these things were not necessary to be talked about because we took them for granted. It was just second nature to us. And we didn't sing the national anthem a lot because we didn't need to bang our chests and be muscular about our nationality because we were so confident in who we were that we didn't bother with it.
And that's
And
so foreign to an American audience. Americans don't understand that because it's so central to our identities. This is one of the subtle
yeah,
differences between our cultures. Just continue. I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
it's a very important point you make. And sadly, and I say this sadly, I think that going forward to rebalance the organism that is the United Kingdom, we are now going to have to be much more self-confident, much more proselytizing, much more muscular in advancing our nationality and our Christian heritage, our culture, our roots, our history, everything. We're going to have to be much more on the front foot of it because unless we get on the front foot, we're going to be overrun by people who hold views that are not just antithetical to us, but antipathetic to us, who wish to wipe us out. And so, Advance UK is going to have a very positive program of the advancement of what it means to be British, and just remind everyone why they should be so damn proud of this country.
Ben, where can our viewers learn more about Advance UK and join your fight?
So the website address is www.advanceuk.org.uk. I'll just repeat that, www.advanceuk.org.uk. And please go and sign up. If you're a member of the British electorate, you are welcome to sign. In accordance with our belief of freedom of speech, we don't really care what you said on Twitter before. Anyone is welcome to join our party as long as you're not a member of another party. That's fine. That's our only prescription. And you can also find us on X at _advance UK. And you can all find me, Preston, if anyone wants to find me on X at Ben Habib #6 at Ben
Ben,
Habib 6.
this interview is going to get seen by hundreds of thousands of people in the United States. So, what's one message you have for kind of the populist sovereignty movement in the United States who want to resist globalism and supranational organizations and reclaim their divine heritage?
I would say to them, back President Trump, uh, pray that the team of champions stays together, encourage them to stay together, deliver the agenda that he so brilliantly set out on his first day as president, and save the Western world because a lot is riding on your success.
Brilliant. Ben, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Preston. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone's talking about better creatives, better ROAS, better funnels, but none of that matters if you're scaling with the wrong fuel. Most e-com founders are trying to grow using cash that drains fast or debt that demands too much too soon. There's a better way. It's called ad capitalism, and it gives you access to revolving credit built specifically for ad spend. No pitching, no equity, just growth on your terms. Tap to see how it works. Welcome back, folks, to the Preston Bates Show, where we're tearing through the lies of this world to arm you with the truth. God's truth, Christ's truth. We just heard from Ben Habib, a man taking on the Ahrimanic globalists with his Advance UK movement, fighting for your sovereignty, your freedom, your God-given right to stand tall. But he's not alone in this spiritual Armageddon. There are warriors out there, imperfect, human, but chosen, who felt God's hand, heard his call, and stepped into the fire to battle darkness. Tonight we're talking about two of them, Alex Jones and Donald Trump, modern mystical Christians who've had direct encounters with the divine and are now leading the charge against the forces trying to chain your soul. Stay with me, because their stories are going to light a fire in you to join this fight. Let's start with Alex Jones. You know him. InfoWars, that bullhorn voice waking millions to the globalist nightmare. But what you might not know is what set him on this path. Back in 1997, 28 years ago, Alex had a moment that changed everything. He told the story, and it's raw, it's real. He was on air doing his thing when, boom, he felt a presence. Not a creepy hair-raising kind you get when evil's lurking. No, this was awe-inspiring, overwhelming, like standing in the shadow of something so vast it makes your knees buckle. He called it an ambassador angel, a messenger from God, downloading a mission in a millisecond. Fight evil, wake the world. And folks, that's exactly what he's done. Here's Alex in his own words describing his mystical experience.
Well, I've been on air about 3 years. And God, the Holy Spirit said, okay, you want the real job, buddy? You're about to get it. And here's possible futures, and you want the download? First, here's the danger. You say you want it, you're going to get it. And I went on there and I said, we're going to lead a global awakening, and it's going to be absolutely gigantic. And it'll be the recognized detonator that's been this broadcast. And God told me that. And it happened. Been telling that story since it happened 27 years ago, 28 years ago. And I went on air the next day on radio, and I said, this is what happened, and it was a mystical experience. I didn't see God or anything, but I felt the presence. It's not like getting the willies or something where your skin crawls, and your hair stands on the back of your neck when you're in the presence of evil. It was just more like a presence, and awe-inspiring and scary in the awesomeness of the presence. Like, whoa, okay. And I'm like, it's all instantaneous. It's like the whole downloads per millisecond. It's like, is this God? It's like, this is ambassador. Big angel. Boom. Philip in the room. Ooh, okay. You got my attention. What's going on here? Well, you say you want to fight evil. And then back to 3 years old. And that first big mystical experience, lying in bed going to sleep at night and seeing the evil of the world and the pain of the children and telling God and crying, I want to help the children. And then the other events all leading up to that point. But when God favors you, so's the devil. So my biggest problem is not intimidation from the globalists or fear of them. My biggest problem is the flesh. And the devil knows how to plug into that. And only God has allowed me to persevere through this. And that's why I need your prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ for myself and my family. And then I'd be fulfilled and empowered and protected by the Holy Spirit and God's angels. Because I can't do it without God. And your prayer is essential. It's not that I can't do it. I absolutely have no chance of doing it. And I have to remind myself of that constantly, that I wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the powers of darkness. And so do you. So never forget what this is really all about. The battle between good and evil isn't the biggest thing. It's the only thing. The spiritual element isn't part of it. It's all of it. Remember.
Picture this, a young broadcaster already sniffing out the lies of the New World Order gets hit with this divine encounter. He didn't see God's face or hear a booming voice from the clouds. It was a feeling, a knowing, a certainty that said, this is bigger than you, but you're in it. He went on air the next day and told the world, God gave me a job, and it's to lead a global awakening. And look at the fruit, folks. Millions brought to God through InfoWars, through his relentless fight against the Ahrimanic machine, the World Economic Forum, the tech tyrants, the intelligence rats spinning their UFO distractions. Alex is out there battling the materialist nightmare that wants to keep you plugged into a digital prison owned by nobody, worshiping algorithms instead of God. And he's taking on the Luciferian lie too, the one that says you don't need God, you're your own savior. That's pride, folks, and Alex calls it out because he's aligned with Christ's harmony, the divine will that says you're free, but you answer to God. Now, let's talk about Steiner's framework because it shows us why Alex is a warrior for good. Ahriman, that cold spirit of materialism, wants you trapped in a world of control. Think digital IDs, vaccine mandates, the whole transhumanist freak show. Lucifer, the slick talker, tempts you with ego, whispering, forget God, chase your own glory. And the Antichrist, he's the ultimate deceiver, building a fake spiritual reality, the eighth sphere, where souls are cut off from God, enslaved by elites who think they're gods themselves. Alex Jones is a force for good, standing with Christ against these spiritual predators. He's not perfect. Nobody is. But his mystical experience woke him up to his role as God's MVP, a man who's brought more people to the cross than most preachers ever will. He's proof that a direct encounter with the divine doesn't just save you, it sends you into the fight. Next, let's turn to Donald Trump. Yeah, I know some of you are rolling your eyes thinking, Trump, really? But hear me out, because this man's story is a game changer. July 13, 2024, Butler, Pennsylvania. An assassin's bullet grazes his ear a hair's breadth from ending his life. The crowd's screaming. Secret Service is scrambling. But Trump, he stands up, blood on his face, fists in the air, shouting, fight. That moment wasn't political theater, folks. It was spiritual. Trump said it himself since then.
I believe that my life was saved that day in Butler for a very good reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. I believe that.
He felt God's hand, a divine protection, a mission to revive America. He's called it a mystical experience, a moment where he knew he wasn't just fighting for votes. He was fighting for God's people, for the soul of a nation under siege by Ahrimanic globalists. Think about what Trump's up against. The WEF, the UN. The whole globalist cabal wants America neutered, its sovereignty gutted, its people bowing to their technocratic dystopia. That's Ahriman's playbook. Control, materialism, a world where you're a cog in their machine. Then you've got Luciferian elites, the Hollywood types, the media darlings, pushing pride and self-worship, telling you faith is for suckers. Trump's not buying it. After Butler, he's leaned harder into his mission. Protect the borders, break the globalist grip, bring God back into the public square. Is he a saint? No, but he's a warrior aligned with Christ's call to freedom and truth. Steiner would see him as a physical force of good, countering the eight spheres' soul-trapping lies with a vision of a nation under God, not under Klaus Schwab. Here's the thing about both these men. They're not churchianity Christians, checking boxes, posing for Sunday photo ops. They've had direct experiences of God, moments that shook them, changed them, turned them into weapons for the divine will. Churchianity, with its legalistic, don't sin, sit quietly nonsense, would have kept them on the sidelines. But Christ, he called them into the arena. Alex felt God's presence and became a voice for millions. Trump felt God's protection and doubled down on saving America. Their psychology, their agency, their very souls were transformed by Christ, not by some pastor's rulebook. And that's what we're calling you to tonight, folks. Not a shallow checkbox faith that Ahriman uses to keep you asleep, but a blazing personal encounter with Christ that makes you God's MVP. So here's your challenge. Pray for what Alex and Trump got. Pray for a moment where Christ's infinite compassion hits you like a freight train, where you know God's real and he's got a job for you. Pray to be transformed, to step into your role as a co-worker in God's plan, not a spectator. This isn't about escaping some fluffy spiritual realm. That's Lucifer's trap. It's about ascending to God through Christ, bringing his will to earth, fighting the Ahrimanic globalists and Luciferian lies with every ounce of your soul. Alex and Trump are showing you how. Are you ready to follow? Stay with us. We'll be right back. You've optimized the funnel, dialed in the CPA, nailed your LTV, but something's still blocking scale, and it's not what you think. It's not your ads, it's not your offer, it's your capital. Most founders hit a wall, not because their marketing doesn't work, but because they don't have the right money to fuel what is working. Ad capitalism fixes that. No equity, no gatekeepers, just smart capital for paid traffic. Tap now to learn more. All right, folks, we've been through fire tonight on the Preston Bates Show. We started with a spiritual map. Christ is our compass and this Armageddon of good versus evil. We talked to Ben Habib, a man slugging it out with the Armonic globalists fighting for Britain's soul with Advance UK. And we just heard about Alex Jones and Donald Trump, two modern mystical Christians who felt God's touch and are battling the darkness with everything they've got. Now it's time to bring it home. This isn't just a show, it's a call to arms. You're not meant to watch this fight from the sidelines. You're meant to be God's MVP on earth. And I'm going to tell you how to get there. Let's recap the battlefield. We're using a framework that cuts through the noise. Good is harmony with God's will through Christ, the force that builds, unites, sets you free. That's God, that's Christ, that's the fire in men like Alex Jones waking millions, or Trump staring down globalists to save a nation. Evil, it's the chaos and control that wants your soul in chains. Ahriman, the materialist spirit, is behind the WEF's dystopian schemes, the digital cages they're building to trap you. Lucifer, the voice of pride, tempting you to ditch God for your own ego. And the Antichrist, the slickest of all, peddling a fake salvation that leads you to the eighth sphere, a spiritual prison where elites harvest souls for their own power. Their physical agents, Bill Gates, intelligence rats, the whole globalist crew, are out there executing this plan, and believe me, none of them are atheists. They're tuned into the dark forces, hoping you stay asleep and never figure it out. But here's where they've miscalculated, folks. You're not asleep. You're here, you're listening, and you've got Christ as your compass. And let me be blunt. One of the biggest obstacles isn't the World Economic Forum or the CIA. It's churchianity, that hollow, legalistic version of Christianity that reduces Christ to a hall monitor, checking if you showed up on Sunday. Churchianity is a subtle evil aligned with Ahriman, dulling your spiritual senses, keeping you passive when you should be a warrior. Churchianity is not about Christ's real purpose, which is transforming your heart, your mind, your agency, so you can stand up to the darkness and say no. Alex Jones didn't get that from a pew. Trump didn't get that in a hymn book. They got it from a direct, undeniable experience of God's love. And that's what you need to pray for. So here's your mission, and it's simple but world-changing. Pray for two things. First, pray for an encounter with Christ's infinite compassion, something so real it rewires your soul. Second, pray to be made larger in Christ, to become an agent of God's will, not your own. Self-will, that's Lucifer's game, and it's a dead end. God's will is where there's power, where there's freedom, and where you become unstoppable. John 8:32 says it the best. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. That's not a slogan, folks. That's a promise from Christ himself. Tonight we saw what this looks like. Ben Habib's fighting Ahriman's globalist machine, reclaiming sovereignty for God's people. Alex Jones and Trump, through mystical moments with the divine, are waking the world to the spiritual stakes. They're not superheroes. They're just men who said yes to God's call. And you can too. You're a child of God, born for this fight, born to tear down the lies of churchianity, the World Economic Forum, the whole rotten system. So pray for that encounter. Pray for the transformation. And then get to work, because the spiritual Armageddon doesn't need spectators. It needs MVPs. If this hits you, if you're feeling that fire, will you do me a favor? Share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments what's stopping you from being God's MVP. And then please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Then join us next time, because we're not slowing down. I'm Preston Bates, and until we meet again, keep Christ as your compass. God bless.